Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Ms. Argenteri, you just talked about going after the corporate officers, directors. And what happens to them? Do they also get to enter into these deferred or these limiting agreements so that they do not face any jail time? What happens to the corporate officers that you just talked about going after?
So as I said, we've charged over 30 corporate executives this year by guilty plea or convicting them after trial. I would also like to point out that we in the criminal division are trying more white-collar cases than ever. Last year, we hit a record high. We tried 52 cases of individuals involved in corporate crime, and we convicted 57. So individuals are being held accountable.
That's good to know. So what happens to them, those who you have tried?
So
Do they go to prison?
Yes, they do.
Yeah, would you consider that to be one of the best deterrents for white-collar crime, when the executives go to prison?
So there are many deterrents to white-collar crime. One is holding individuals accountable so that others in the public can see what happens. But by holding companies accountable, we also engage in specific deterrents.
Thing is, though, companies don't go to prison. And so I do have some concerns about the holding and also boards and shareholders. So these are not just the executives of the companies, but their shareholders. So can you speak a little bit about, how and when the department could hold corporate boards and shareholders accountable?
So
not just the executives of the company.
So with our criminal resolutions, again, we've entered into 90 since 2017. With companies, we are holding the shareholders and the company itself accountable. And the way that we're doing that is when we resolve with a company, whether it's through a guilty plea, a deferred prosecution agreement, or a non-prosecution agreement, those are highly negotiated, forward-looking agreements. Mm-hmm. And under those agreements, companies have real obligations. They have to cooperate in an ongoing fashion with the government. They have to remediate their compliance programs. And what that means is we have our experts look at their compliance programs, meet with their compliance officers, understand what their risk is, how their compliance programs, and then they have to remediate. And that's something that we judge them on. And if they fail to live up to the obligations under those agreements, there are serious consequences. So for example, in 2019, we entered into a deferred prosecution agreement with Ericsson. Ericsson did not live up to the terms of its agreement. It violated the agreement by not disclosing to us relevant information we asked for that prevented us from prosecuting individuals. They also failed to disclose a problematic bribery scheme in Iraq. What did we do? We basically tore up their agreement. They had to plead guilty to the two felonies that had been on the table before. They lost all of the cooperation credit they had received, had to pay an additional $200 million, and we extended the term of their monitorship. So all of these agreements have an impact on companies, and what we're trying to do is to incentivize good corporate conduct to detect and to deter future misconduct.
So I note that the fraud section employs around 150 prosecutors to root out white-collar crime. That's only a slight increase over the number of prosecutors employed by the fraud section 10 or even 20 years ago. Do you have the resources that you need and the number of prosecutors that you need to prosecute these kinds of crimes?
So we have been able to, with the resources that we have, to prioritize white-collar prosecution, including individual prosecutions, but with more, we could always do more.
I think you should have more resources. I do have a question about the use of forfeiture. So this is both for you and for Mr. Olson. Mr. Olson, several months ago, the department announced a guilty plea involving the attempted sale of Iranian oil, and the plea involved a fine of $2.5 million, a period of corporate probation, but most significantly, the company transporting the oil was required to bring the oil to the United States, where it is the subject of a forfeiture action. And the oil is worth perhaps some $75 million. Do you think that you are using the forfeiture provisions that you have to the extent that you can? For example, how about seizing the ship that is being used to transport the oil?
Senator, of course, we look for every opportunity to impose costs on those individuals or companies that violate our sanctions laws. That is a very effective tool in preventing that money that would go from the illicit sale, for example, in that case of oil, to the Iranian regime, where it will support their malign efforts in the region and against us here. So yes, I mean, we look for every opportunity to extract the maximum penalty to impose those costs. However, of course, we are subject to the rules of the court and to follow the rule of law in general to as we go after that money, whether it's to seize it or forfeit it.
Maybe we need to provide you with more authority to seize more of the assets of these bad actors. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Senator Cornyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot we could talk about, but Mr. Olson, I want to talk about Section